Now, it's time to answer a question submitted by you. Today's question comes from Ken. Ken asks, housing is so expensive these days, especially in the city. I feel like all of my money goes to rent. How do I get ahead and afford rent? And will I ever be able to afford home ownership? Ken, this is a great question, and I'm sure that you're not alone in asking this question. And while you may not like my answer, it's the one that you might need to hear. Ideally, we want to keep our housing costs, our overall housing costs, less than 1/3 of our take-home pay, less than 1/3 of our monthly budget that we're writing. And for a lot of us, where housing is starting to feel the pinch or rent goes way up, it might be putting that housing cost out of bounds, way above what we can consider affordable. If we have something that is half of our take-home pay or even more, well, that makes us house poor. We are, unfortunately, given the circumstances, living in a place that we cannot afford, mathematically speaking. So if that's your situation, if your housing is significantly higher than 1/3 of your take-home pay, you have two options. You need to either try to find a way to generate more income in a stable, predictable manner, or you need to be able to get your housing costs down. This may involve moving farther out from where you are relative to your place of work, where housing may not be as desirable because there's a longer commute. It may also involve getting roommates or downsizing to a residence that is smaller and less than ideal because it's so much smaller. Now, that's not to say that you have to sacrifice to the point where the place you get is borderline unlivable or unsafe, but there are going to be options that are less expensive than where you are now, almost certainly. Now, this part of my answer is only temporary. This is just so that you can get a little bit of traction with your budget and start saving toward affording something that's more stable. See, when you're renting, rent can go up without warning. You don't get to control rent. The landlord in the market controls the rent. When you have a mortgage, the mortgage becomes predictable. Unless you get an adjustable rate mortgage or an ARM, don't do that. I don't like ARMs. ARMs are going to twist your arm and send you into foreclosure more likely than not if you're not careful. When you start looking for home ownership, you want a fixed rate mortgage. And I personally like 15, 20-year fixed rate mortgages. And I only recommend that you start looking at saving up for a down payment once you're in a stable place right around where you'd be ready to start investing. You want to make sure you have a fully funded emergency fund in place and are otherwise debt free. This is going to free up your income, free up your power to direct all of your attention to building that down payment, and take all the undue risk that you have along with homeownership, which can cripple your situation and transform homeownership from a blessing into a curse. I don't want your home to be a curse. I want you to have a healthy experience when you move from renting and getting a mortgage. Renting is very good if you're in a temporary situation where you expect to change within the next 4 to 5 years. But if you plan on sticking around where you are for more than 4 to 5 years, well, you want to be working toward that home ownership once you're in the situation where you can afford pursuing a mortgage in a healthy way. Now, I mentioned I'm a bigger fan of the 15 to 20-year mortgage as opposed to the 30-year mortgage. Let me explain why that is. What we are doing when we are buying a home and getting a mortgage is we are attempting to establish debt-free homeownership before we retire. The earlier, the better. Now, say you're 30 years old. I don't know how old you are, Ken, but I'm just going to say you're 30 years old. If you get a 30-year mortgage, you are 60 by the time you get that thing paid off if you don't put anything extra on it. Now, at 60 years old, you can start getting into retirement. However, if you at any point move or refinance, you reset the clock on that and you kick that home payoff down the road. And if you end up being 40 and refinancing to a 30-year, well, now you're paying it off by age 70. And if you're 45 or 50, now we're talking 75 or 85. And I don't want you to have a mortgage your whole life. I want you to get a home paid off so that you can own the roof over your head and reduce your exposure to undue risk